Welcome, everybody, to Survive and Advance on the Gruely True Sports Network. Survive and Advance is brought to you by MyBookie.ag. Make sure you go to thegruelytruth.net, click on the MyBookie.ag banner. That will take you to the site, and a first-time deposit gets up to a 50% cash bonus up to $1,000. And I am your host, Mike Goodpaster, and I want to welcome in my co-host, 1981 national champion, Steve Risley. How you doing, Steve?
Hey, I'm doing great. Hey, with my bookie AG, I'm going to open up an account and give $2,000. Am I going to get another $1,000?
Yes. If you do it now while we have the promo.
How long? Because I want I'm getting my friend Bobby Sheridan of the Sheridan Report. He's going to bet my baseball for me all summer long. So I'm going to put $2,000 in, open an account, and they're going to give me. So I'm going to have $3,000 in my account after I do that.
You will have $3,000 in your account after you do that.
And if Bobby loses it, I know where he lives.
It doesn't matter, because if you're a grown-ass man, you wouldn't bitch about it, because you just made the determination that Bobby's smarter than you and can make you. It's like playing the stock market, Steve. Sometimes things hit, sometimes they don't. All right, real quick, I want to welcome in from Fansided and Busting Brackets, Brian Rauf. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing well. It's one of the best days of the year. We got a bracket in front of us. Finally.
It is the greatest day of the year, and it's up there at least, because this is a time where 68 teams could win a national championship. Not really, but in theory they could. Let's go ahead and let's start off, because things that stood out to me from the selection committee is this. Sunday doesn't matter, because if it did, how are the Cincinnati Bearcats a number 7 seed?
Well, I thought they should have been a 6 probably, but they don't have the, I guess you could say, top quality wins of a lot of the other seeds that were ranked, or teams that were seeded ahead of them. Beating Houston, though, certainly I would assume would have put them on that 6 line. But they seemed pretty locked into a 7 or 8 for most of the season. So I didn't have a huge problem with it, although I would have put them up another seed line.
Well, I don't think Maryland has the credentials to be a 6 seed.
No, they simply benefited from playing in the Big Ten and playing a tougher schedule, so their losses weren't viewed as terrible losses, even though they have more of them than you would probably expect from a 6 seed.
All right, Steve, I'm sure you have bunches of questions. Have at it. Because what we'll do is we'll let Steve ask his questions, and then we will just go, east, south, west, and bracket by bracket, and just pick our final 4.
Let's do it.
Well, I really don't have a lot of questions. I actually thought that given the parameters that we worked on, or that the NCAA used, I thought they did a good job with the bracketology. I thought they pretty much, given what we had to do and what the parameters were, I'm not displeased with this bracket. Is anybody else displeased with this? Think that anybody got screwed here royally?
I'm displeased with it. I don't see how Oklahoma's the number 9 seed.
Yeah, I don't know how Oklahoma's a 9. I don't know how Washington's a 9. And I don't know how Arizona State got in. But
to tell you the truth, I don't know how Oklahoma and Washington got in. I think there's teams that I would rather see UNC Greensboro in this.
I was tweeting Saturday night as Washington lost to Oregon in the Pac-12 title game that Washington, I knew they were going to get in, obviously, but should have been more on the bubble than people were giving them, I guess, credit for. Their net ranking ended up being 45, which is that of a bubble team. We saw NC State get left out with a net ranking of 33. And Washington was only 1-6 against Quad 1 teams, which, when you combine those two metrics together, it's a resume that looks a lot like Clemson, and Clemson wasn't even really in the mix here.
All right, Steve.
Okay, so yeah, my question would be then, describe the net ranking, because the
Nobody
first 4
knows.
out. Well, okay, but Brian, the first 4 out, I think all had lower net rankings than the last 4 in.
Yeah, well, it was essentially the NCAA's attempt to replace the RPI. And this was the first year it was being used, and so we were all kind of interested to see how they would use it, whether it was more of just another tool in the toolbox, so to speak, or if it was going to be a real leading indicator. And I think we saw with a couple teams, as I mentioned, NC State being 33. I know Clemson was up in the 30s as well. Texas had a really high net ranking. They got left out, and some other teams like St. John's, who were, I think, 73rd in that ranking, and I believe Belmont or Temple was in the 60s, got in over some of those teams. So I think, for the most part, it's useful, but the committee showed, I think, that it's more of just another tool in the toolbox that they look at more than anything really indicative of a team's chance.
Well, how about this?
Yeah, because
net 32 or net whatever the hell it is, compared to RPI, it seems like the net helps power conference schools more than what the RPI did, because I know I read today that if you went by straight RPI, UNC Greensboro would have been like 30 or 31, which probably would have put them in the tournament.
Right. And one of the things the net values is strength of schedule, and particularly strength of record, so the teams you played, where you played them, and how badly you beat them. And because power conferences have more opportunities against good teams, it inflates their standing in that particular part of the net ranking, because the net is made up of essentially 5 different metrics within one single metric, and that strength of record is one of those 5 metrics.
Well, it was interesting because when I watched the CBS selection show, they had the gentleman who was head of the selection committee on, and they asked him kind of those kind of questions like that. And they said there were teams, and again, I'll use Indiana as an example, and I don't think Indiana should have been in the tournament. It's 17 and 15, so I'm not trying to make a case for them. I'm just saying I'm going to use them because I know Indiana better than most any other team. Obviously, it's my school and my team. But they had a net ranking of 52, 53, and they, should qualified by the way the ranking system should play out if they're using the net. But then he came out and said, well, we used the net, but then we took wins and losses. Mm-hmm. So what are all the factors involved in selecting? I mean, you have 32 automatic bids.
Yep.
Is that too many?
No, I don't think so. I mean, the field's big enough to where you have the 32 at-larges, and then 32 automatic bids, and then you have 36 at-larges. And I've always kind of held the mantra that with a tournament this big, it's about deciding a national champion when all is said and done, although there's obviously big implications involved for schools along the way, monetarily and just brand notoriety and all that sort of stuff. But the tournament's about determining a national champion. And if you're, maybe fighting for that 36th at-large bid, maybe the 68th team in the field, and you get left out, I don't think you should have any real qualms about being left out, because in what other sport is the 68th best team given a chance to win a national championship? It doesn't happen.
Okay.
The field's big enough, I think, to erase any kind of doubt when it comes to a legitimate snub or anything of that sort.
Yeah, but what about this?
So
Last year, Loyola Chicago, if they would have lost the conference tournament, wouldn't even have got in, and they were a Final Four team. So I don't think the question is for a team like Indiana. I think it's more of a team like UNC Greensboro, because we know Indiana from watching them has no chance to win a national championship. With UNC Greensboro, we don't know that as much because they don't get the opportunity to play big-time schools day in and day out.
Right.
And Mike, and I agree with you entirely, Mike. And again, I'm not trying to make an argument for Indiana here. I'm using them as an example.
Well, how about this, Steve?
I
would look at it like this. I think Indiana belongs in more than 1 or 2 teams that got in, but I think there's 4 teams below Indiana that deserve to be in over Indiana.
And before Indiana does, exactly. That's why I'm not trying to make an argument for Indiana. But here's my question to both of you. This is a limited field tournament, correct?
Yeah.
Meaning it's an invitational. Should they just not take the 64 best teams and not worry about conference winners in, Tupelo, conference or whatever?
Then you're going to leave out even more of the small conference teams because they're not going to let North Carolina Central or North Dakota State in then. So then you're going to make it even more to, big power conferences.
So my question then is, do either of you think we have the 64 best teams or 68 best teams in the tournament? We don't. I don't think we do. What do you guys think?
I think you're close to it.
Yeah, I think we probably have the 40 or 50 best teams. And you could argue that some of the mid-majors who got automatic bids and lesser conferences aren't part of that group. But one of the good things about the NCAA tournament is the fact that everybody has a shot, again, at winning a national championship. If you're going to have a national championship tournament that doesn't allow everybody to participate, kind of like college football, as we've seen with UCF, then I don't think those teams have a reason to play. And so you kind of just go back to the foundation of the sport and the way the sport is set up. Basically, you need to give those teams a chance, which the automatic bid does. So I'm okay with having the 50 best teams and then giving mid-majors, lower-end mid-majors a shot, even though they haven't had a chance to really play anybody this year.
And to me, on the mic now, I'm just going to – you're going to yell at me for this. I know it. That speaks to participation right there. If you're going to let, like, Garner Webb in and keep an NC State
really?
Wait
a second. Wait a second. So you want to keep Gardner Webb out, a team that won a conference tournament, and let a team like Indiana in that failed miserably all season?
Get off of Indiana. Get off of Indiana.
It's what you want to talk about because it's what you want to know best. But the thing is this. All right, let's go ahead with just name a team in a big conference.
North Carolina State.
Yeah, North Carolina State failed. Gardner Webb won their conference tournament. So how are they a participation trophy? They earned their way in. North Carolina State didn't. And North Carolina State, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not 100% sure here, but I'm pretty sure their schedule non-conference is pretty much crap, Brian.
It was 353rd. It was the very worst in the country.
Yeah, so their schedule was worse than Gardner Webb.
All right, bad choice of team. North Carolina Charlotte. Take North Carolina Charlotte, the team that you're high on.
North Carolina Charlotte. In 1977, they were really good.
No, what's the
UNC Greensboro?
UNC Greensboro. I said Charlotte over Greensboro. So is North Carolina Greensboro better than Gardner Webb?
Yes, but once again, Gardner Webb
won
their conference tournament. They won their conference tournament.
Okay, but and it's like playing rec basketball versus travel basketball.
Not really.
In youth sports. Okay.
It's not because there are rules set, and Gardner Webb won.
Right.
Last year UMBC was a 16 seed, and they won. And Gardner Webb's a team that they're not a bad team. I don't think they're as bad as a typical number 16, Brian. I think they've won 23 or 24 games this year. They're a team that doesn't rebound really well, but they play in a conference with Campbell, Winthrop, Radford. Those are all three solid teams. So I think if you're going to pick on somebody here, you go more towards like the North Carolina Centrals of the world, Steve.
Yeah, I just picked Gardner Webb because I'm looking at the bracketology and they played Virginia. It's the first name that came up. Again, I'm not picking on anybody. I'm just looking at examples of where I think this tournament's mismanaged in how the selection process is done.
But how about this? There's no other college sport that I believe allows everybody to have a chance to win a national championship. I don't think that's a participation award because I think when you get participation awards is when you're a college football team and you're not in a Power 5 conference. UCF, they get to play for a consolation prize against a big school every year. That's a participation award. They don't get the opportunity to prove whether they're good enough or not.
Okay. Yeah. Just discussion. I would say if you're going to have a limited field tournament, you throw out the conference championships and say, I'm taking the 64 best teams that have performed based on the net rankings.
I thought about this while watching these conference tournaments, though. And I found the conference tournaments highly entertaining, number one.
Yeah.
And they were compelling. Without the conference tournaments, you don't have that. I would rather have that, Brian. I don't know about you. And I always hear people bitch that, the regular season should matter more. But, I think there's a lot to be said for the team that's playing the best at that moment in time being the team that gets a shot.
I agree. And I think with particularly the one bid mid-majors, we've seen this a little bit in the past couple years, but they're starting to switch to tournament formats that are more favorable for the top seeds. So they still keep these conference tournaments, but the regular season also matters. The West Coast Conference, Gonzaga and St. Mary's essentially had a quadruple bye, even though the conference only has, I believe, 10 teams. essentially 2 games every night, and each as you went down, the 1 and 2 seeds had like a quadruple bye, the 3 and 4 had a triple bye, essentially setting things up in a more favorable stance for your better teams, because you want to put your better teams in the NCAA tournament if you're a traditional one-bid league, which the West Coast Conference was not, but I think we'll start seeing a lot of other lesser conferences adopt that model, giving their better teams a better chance to win while still maintaining the conference tournament format.
Okay. So, and here's my point. In this year, there seemed to be a fair amount of conference tournament upsets, which teams that got hot on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and won, and then the predicted winner and the who we thought was going to be the auto bid and go, it's like a Houston. And, you're thinking, okay, how many teams are going to come out of that conference? But Houston's upset, so you give a at-large bid away to a team that's probably not really worthy of being in the tournament.
No, you didn't. Wrong
analogy.
I would say go to the Missouri Valley Conference. That's
okay.
where you had a team in Bradley that got there. Houston lost to Cincinnati, but I know what you're saying.
Okay, that's a bad choice. It's the concept I'm talking about. It's like you have that deal where the favored team, who's like, okay, yeah, they played great in their conference all year. They come out and they win their conference. They dominate their conference, and then they get upset in the tournament after one game, and then we've got to put this team in who upset them, and they're in. So that takes an automatic spot. Now you've taken an at-large spot you have to give to Houston because Houston deserves to be in, and that takes it away from North Carolina, Greensboro, or Indiana. And again, this is not about Indiana. I'm just using it as an example. You start taking away those at-large spots because these upsets occur, and does that really bode well for the whole process?
Well, I think I have 3 thoughts about that. Number one, UMBC last year was a team like that who wouldn't have been in but got hot, beat Vermont in the American East Championship game, got in and won a game, and made some noise. And we've seen that happen on a number of occasions where the hot team goes in, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to win a game in the tournament. They just haven't necessarily played to that level all season. It doesn't mean they can't win a game or 2 or 3 in the NCAA tournament. There's also no set NCAA rule where the conference tournament champion has to get the automatic bid. There's not even an NCAA rule you have to have a conference tournament. If a conference wants, they can give their automatic bid to the regular season champion. None of them do that because they all want the money grab that comes with conference tournaments, but it's a conference decision, not necessarily an NCAA decision.
Really?
Yeah. The Ivy League, Harvard and Yale played for their championship the other day, but I think it was just up until recently the Ivy League
was like
was
3
just
years ago.
Yeah, I mean the Ivy League was you won the conference, you got in because they didn't even have a conference tournament.
So that's not an NCAA rule that the winner, there's a designated winner of every conference that automatically gets in.
No.
Well, every conference has an automatic bid, but each conference has the discretion to determine who receives that automatic bid and how that automatic bid gets rewarded, whether it's based on regular season performance or a conference tournament champion. All of them have now gone to the conference tournament champion because of the money grab that comes with having a conference tournament.
All right, so Mike, should they go back and say the regular season conference champion gets the auto bid and the tournament gets you hope for?
No.
Okay.
What I want is this.
Explain.
What I want in a tournament is not the 68 best teams for the season. I want the 68 best teams at the time the tournament starts, because I think that's what matters. As a coach, it's just if you look at the NFL or professional football, you lose your first game, the coach of that team doesn't care. Your first couple games, win or lose, you're trying to figure out what's wrong with your team and fix it. And you've got teams here that have fixed it. I mean, you talked about Gardner-Webb. Did you know Gardner-Webb this year was 2-0 at ACC schools? Now, sure, it was just Georgia Tech and Wake Forest, but still, that's 2 wins at ACC schools. I want the best teams at the moment, and this is the thing. Do you really want what we saw over the past week taken away?
No,
I
no,
personally don't.
No.
Go ahead, Steve.
Go ahead, Brian. I'm sorry.
No, that's why March becomes so great, is because there are all of these tournaments, and essentially everybody starts back at zero, and you can play your way as far as you're able to play your way, and it's exciting and a lot of fun.
Well, how about this, Steve? You've talked about this a lot before, where one and done basketball is a lot different than a regular season. And don't we want the best one and done teams playing in a one and done tournament?
Oh, that's a great question, Mike. Yes, of course you do. You want the best one and done teams, but I'm trying to think of a legitimate argument to give you that you won't beat me up on, and I don't really have one for you. So yeah, you're right. Again, I said at the beginning, I'm not displeased with this bracketology, the way it turned out.
Yeah, I am. I always will be until they give the smaller guys more of a chance, because I really don't have a need to see Minnesota or Iowa or teams like that I know are not going very far. I mean, I've seen that. I know that. And this is built on the little guys pulling upsets. Last year we had Loyola in the Final Four. We had UMBC upset Virginia. So all these people that say, well, UNC Greensboro doesn't have a case because they're 26-6, but they lost there. I mean, they didn't beat enough good quality teams. I mean, there's a lot more Loyola Chicago's, Butler a decade ago, teams that come in and mysteriously go to the Sweet 16 nobody knows about, than there are teams like Iowa at a 10 seed or Minnesota at a 10 seed that go to the Sweet 16 and surprise us. At least I think that's what it is, because the thing about teams like, and it's not to pick on Minnesota and Iowa, but it's just I'm looking at the bracket and they're the 2 10 seeds on the top part that I'm looking at. But it's not to pick on them, but we know what they are. They're not consistently good, and, they're not making it into the second weekend, where teams like UNC Greensboro, I mean, I think if UNC Greensboro played Minnesota or Iowa, they would beat them, Brian.
I agree. I think I would pick them over either one of those teams in a first-round matchup. Again, the road guy is always at a disadvantage just because of the schedule that they play and the conferences that they're in. I think the committee did a good job of moving back a little bit more towards rewarding the small schools. I was very happy we saw Belmont get in. I was happy that UNC Greensboro was the first team out of the field that they would have been in if Oregon hadn't beaten Washington. I like things going in that direction. I agree they deserve, I think, a little bit more of a chance. But I think the committee did at least a better job than they have in years past of giving them those chances.
Yeah, I agree. All right, let's go ahead,
I
Steve.
agree, too. And Mike, that's a great perspective, and I appreciate that perspective. Here's a question, Brian. The way it turned out, did this bracketology strengthen the NIT? And because the NIT, we did a show on IU basketball weekly last night, and we talked about it, and the NIT is pretty chock full of some pretty good teams. I mean, there's some weak teams, obviously, but the NIT has some very strong teams in there that several of which should be playing in the dance, but they're not for the right reasons. Does this strengthen the NIT, and is this part of the NCAA's thing, like, let's get both tournaments going and cash out more and get the NIT back to strength, to where people will want to watch it as much as they want to watch the NCAA, or in between?
No, I think the NIT has a lot of teams who people, one, are familiar with this year because of how big and quite frankly bad the NCAA tournament bubble was. Yeah. The fact that a lot of more teams than normal were in play, because if they got one or two more wins, then they would have been in the tournament. So I think there's a lot more teams at play who weren't necessarily NCAA tournament caliber in a normal year, but were in play because of how bad the bubble was. So we're more familiar with those teams. We've also seen some of those teams win big games, which certainly helps. We've also, because they're in the NIT, we've seen them lose a number of big games and even games to much lesser opponents. So I think it's just a matter of the fact that maybe we know more of these teams than normal because of how big or how many teams were in the mix in the bubble conversation this year.
Mike, any thoughts on that? Or you disagree?
I think this is the NIT. It means nothing. no matter what, the NCAA does not care about building the NIT up. And I think the reason that you think this tournament is strong or the NIT is strong is, number one, you got some big names in it. But what this tournament is, these are a bunch of teams that are streaky. And if you catch them on the right night, hell, they could win a game or two in the NCAA tournament like in Indiana. But on a normal night, they're just not very good. That's why they're there. That's why nobody cares. And that's why, unless you get UNC Greensboro, maybe it'll be a big deal to them. But to Indiana, come on, they're giving away student tickets. Xavier, I think, is charging $10 a ticket. I mean, so in the end, nobody at an Indiana or Xavier cares about this tournament. They don't care if they win it or not. And do teams still hang NIT championship banners?
I think it depends on the school.
That's what I think. Because I know Steve brought this up. I don't think I don't think Indiana would hang an NIT banner if they won it this year.
Didn't the girls team win the NIT last year? IU's girls team, they hung a banner.
That's a big deal to them. And they sold out that championship game because they never do anything until the last 2 years. So what I'm saying is this. In 1979, it meant more because you guys beat Purdue. And back then, it did mean that you're probably a year or so away from doing something special. Because if you look at it, most of those teams that won the NIT back then would make a Final Four run within the next year or two. But today, do you know who won the NIT last year, Steve?
No idea.
Okay, it was Penn State. And Penn State off winning that NIT this year lost more games than what they won. I don't think it means anything. I don't think the NCAA gives two shits if they build the NIT up or not. And the NIT was really relevant in the 1950s and early 60s.
Yeah. Well, there was a point in time actually where the NIT was actually a bigger tournament than the NCAA.
Yeah, 40s and 50s.
Yeah, 40s, 50s. Yeah, it was actually a bigger tournament to be asked to play in.
But that was so long ago, Steve. You weren't even born yet.
I wasn't even born then.
All right, let's go ahead. Let's look at the East bracket.
East bracket.
Yeah, we got Duke up top. I'm sure they're going to win their first game. Virginia may say, hey, don't be so sure, but I'm pretty sure they're going to win that game. The games that stand out to me here are the games right beneath them. VCU, UCF, Mississippi State, Liberty. I think the lower seeds in both of those games win those games.
I don't know about Liberty and Mississippi State. Mississippi State, big physical athletic team that hasn't always played up to the potential this year, but I think is going to have the advantage everywhere on the court in that game. And Liberty is a good team, but I do, and I may have picked them to beat a 5 seed if they went up against Wisconsin. If they ended up on that 6th line against some of those other teams. But I think Mississippi State is just kind of a bad matchup for them, particularly there. But with VCU, UCF, I agree. Both of them are defensive teams that game may not hit 60. No one may hit 60 points in that game. Fairly evenly matched, but VCU lost their leading scorer, Marcus Evans, in the A10 tournament. They expect him to be back for this game, but I don't think he's going to be 100% healthy by any stretch. And in a game where points are at a premium, that's going to make a difference.
So when we look at this, Steve, do you think this ends up the way it's drawn up with Duke and Virginia Tech in the Sweet 16?
Duke and Virginia Tech in the Sweet 16. Yeah. I think so. But, the thing that I'll tell you as a player, 51% of this whole thing is luck, and that's what makes March Madness madness and not March predictability. You don't know, but on paper, yes, I would agree with you. The bigger question I have is, Brian, did MSU get screwed here? Having to go up against Duke to get to the Final Four?
I know the big conversation is Michigan State and where they ended up on the seed line, which on its face is ridiculous, the fact that Michigan, overall seed-wise, is lower than Michigan. However, in terms of where they ended up, in terms of regions, Michigan State really benefited, in my mind. You could say they got screwed by going up against Duke in the Elite Eight, but they aren't really going to face anybody great until then. They'll likely face LSU in the Sweet 16, and I actually have LSU winning that game.
I disagree, by the way, but go ahead.
Oh.
LSU is a team facing, obviously, a lot of off-court problems, and no one really knows how they're going to respond and react to those, whether they'll still play at a high level or let those distractions get to them. I think Michigan State has a pretty easy path to the Elite Eight, especially compared to Michigan, who's going to face a very good Nevada or Florida team in the second round, and then probably play Texas Tech in the Sweet 16. When they get to the Elite Eight, they're playing a great one seed against Gonzaga, who actually beat Duke earlier on in the season. Michigan has a much tougher road, in my mind, than Michigan State does.
Yeah, no doubt. But I think LSU loses in the first round to Yale.
Yale's a very good team, but they're another team that I would have liked to pick an upset. I don't think LSU is a great matchup for them, though, because of LSU's size. But
I think we also have the question there with the coaching situation.
Continuity.
Oh, absolutely. I think some people are blowing that a little bit more out of proportion than it necessarily is. Now that they have Devontae Smart back, who was suspended and held out during the initial part of all of that, it's being a little bit overblown because they lost to Florida in the first round, or their first game of the SEC tournament. And I'm not saying that it's not a factor for LSU at all, but Florida has been a bad matchup for them this year, where I believe all three of their games against Florida went into overtime this season, or at least the two regular seasons one did. So even when they had Will Wade, they weren't necessarily beating Florida the same way they were beating all of these other teams. So for me, that game against Florida that has raised some red flags about their potential without Will Wade is more about their matchup with Florida than anything Will Wade related.
Yeah, I think an upset that screams pick me here is Maryland against Belmont or Temple. I think Belmont or Temple either one beats Maryland. Maryland's lost 3 of their last 4. They're in a very weak Big Ten. What do you think about that?
Completely agree.
Because when I look at this with the Big Ten, outside of Michigan State, I could see every one of those schools getting beat in the first round, including Purdue, because I think Old Dominion's better than what people think they are. I think Purdue probably beats them, but I think it wouldn't surprise me if ODU beats them.
I have Old Dominion winning that game.
I do on one bracket, and then I was just sitting here thinking I just picked Yale to beat LSU, so maybe I should chill out a little bit. But go ahead.
Maybe you should just make one bracket and stick with that.
That's all I do.
It is. Purdue has been struggling of late, I think, more than people realize. They have those 2 losses in Minnesota, but even in some of those wins, they haven't played particularly well. Carson Edwards is really, really struggling over the past month. He shot below 25% from the field in 4 of their last 7 games. And that's 25%. That's a terrible percentage, and he's doing worse than that on a consistent basis.
Well, the biggest problem with Carson Edwards, I think, is he's really selfish.
He takes a lot of bad shots.
But all right, another game that sticks out to me is Louisville versus Minnesota, which shows that the NCAA selection committee does have a sense of humor.
Exactly.
When I look at this game, though, I mean, you said Michigan State. I mean, Michigan State, Louisville. I think Louisville could be a tough matchup for them.
Yeah, and they played earlier on this season at Louisville, and Louisville won. And this was back in November or early December, I believe, when Louisville wasn't playing necessarily at their best. That said, Louisville has sort of deteriorated slightly since that comeback loss to Duke when they blew that huge lead. They haven't been the same team since. And Michigan State, while they're injured, is playing at a high level. And Cassius Winston might be playing like the second best player in the country right now, best other than Zion Williamson. I would take the Spartans in that game. I have that matchup in the second round, Michigan State. Louisville.
I haven't taken it too.
Yeah, Louisville can give them a game, but just the way both teams are playing right now, I don't think the Spartans would lose.
And my other question is, why in the hell do they have Minnesota set up so if they beat Louisville to play Michigan State in the second round?
Well, that was going to be my question too. I was going to get there.
I just watched the Big Ten tournament.
Three Big Ten teams. 3 Big Ten teams in the East. I mean, are they working against the Big Ten here?
No, they're trying to get one of them in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, well, they also set up a Duke and Virginia Tech matchup in the Sweet 16 in all likelihood. So
yeah, but Sweet 16, I'm all right with. Playing playing in the second round, though. A little.
Yeah,
much.
but I guess I don't know. If you have 8 teams from a conference in, I guess you're bound to come across one of those at some point.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So I've got Duke and Michigan State in the Elite Eight. You guys the same way?
I have Duke
Definitely.
over LSU.
You got Duke over LSU. I got Duke over Michigan State. Steve?
Oh God, I hate picking Mike because you're going to grill me. I'm going to pick wrong.
I'm not gonna
I'm going to
grill
go
you.
Michigan State. I think Izzo is a factor.
Yeah, Mike
Krzyzewski's a factor.
Krzyzewski's not a factor. Zion Williamson's
No,
not a
I
factor.
said he is a factor.
R.J.
I just
Barrett.
think that if there's any team that can figure out, or any coach who can figure out how to beat Duke, it's Izzo.
You know what
And
I think? I think the most dangerous game for Duke here is the Sweet 16 against Virginia Tech if Virginia Tech gets there, because Virginia Tech's not going to be intimidated. They've played them a lot, and familiarity, makes it more beatable. Yeah, they beat them once.
Yeah.
I don't think the other game was a blowout. So I think the most dangerous game in this entire tournament for Duke could be if Virginia Tech's there in the Sweet 16.
Definitely. But you get down to the Elite Eight, and Brian is or Mike, either one, is MSU playing kind of right now what we see every year. They're playing their best basketball right now. They're healthy. They got their players back. They've got a proven coach.
Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead. No, I said it.
I mean, they're playing really, really well, and I think they've gotten the most they possibly could out of this group. I think at some point, though, as the tournament goes on, I think of the Sweet 16, but I think of the Elite Eight, best case scenario for them if they were to play Duke. Those injuries will catch up to them at some point, especially with what's the guy who got hurt Sunday again, who's out for the season now. They're down to six normal rotation players. They'll throw a couple more guys in spot minutes, but they're down to 6 players who see significant minutes, and eventually that's going to come back to hurt them at some point.
Yeah, I've got Belmont in the Sweet 16, by the way.
I haven't beaten Maryland, but I'm still, maybe I'm being stubborn, but I'm still high on LSU.
And actually, I mean, I haven't made up my complete mind yet, but I'm decently sure that I'm going to have Belmont losing to Duke in the Elite Eight, Steve. Tell me I'm crazy.
No, I can't say that. I mean, no, I can't
It's
say
a
that.
tournament. Hell, we watched Virginia lose to a 1 seed. All right, let's go to the South. So I guess in the East, Brian, you've got Duke. I've got Duke, and Risley has Minnesota. All right.
I'm going to go with Duke. I think the only people who can beat Duke this year is going to be Duke.
I think there's teams that could beat Duke. So.
Well, we'll see. Yeah.
All right.
I'll be wrong.
All right. Next up, I'll tell you what here. When I look at Virginia's draw, I think they got the toughest number 16 seed to play against this year, Brian.
They may have. I would agree.
They're still going to beat the hell out of them, but they got the toughest of them.
They did, but I also think that they got a fairly easy region that's going to set up for a lot of upsets and a fairly easy road to the Final Four for Virginia, to kind of tease my pick there.
Yeah. So when we look at this, Mississippi, Oklahoma, who do you like in this one, Brian?
I think Ole Miss wins very easily.
I do too. Steve?
Yeah, no doubt. I should.
All right. Now, this is an interesting game because we've got Wisconsin against Oregon. Now, Oregon has been one of the hottest teams in the country, but the question is that because they're playing that well, or is that because they play in the Pac-12, Brian?
A little bit of both. They're playing at a very high level, but it's coming against Pac-12 teams, so you take it with a grain of salt. I really like what they've done defensively during the stretch. They've kind of regenerated their identity, so to speak, to become a real hard-nosed defensive team. As you mentioned, they've won 8 games in a row coming into this game. In 7 of those games, they've held their opponents to 61 points or fewer. And for a Wisconsin team that already struggles to score, I think that's a major problem for the Badgers.
Right, Steve?
Wisconsin generally is a team built around 4-year players, older players. I think over the course of the body of work for the whole season, Wisconsin has been more consistent than Oregon. I would put my money on Wisconsin if I was going to bet. But I think they make fewer mistakes than I believe Oregon will make.
All right.
Although they're playing on the West Coast, which is going to favor Oregon. They're in San Jose, California. They're playing out there, so that's going to favor Oregon big time because
I'm going to go
body
with
of fans
Oregon,
is huge,
but not convincingly. Next up, we've got Kansas State and UC Irvine. UC Irvine, I think, is a really good team. Kansas State may not have Dean Wade for this game. What kind of a shot do you get of Irvine here?
I think they'll win.
I do too.
I think they'll win. I think they'll win the game.
Too.
Kansas State.
Actually, I've got Irvine. I've got Irvine in the Sweet 16.
I have them losing to Oregon in the second round. This will be the little pod where there's a bunch of upsets. But Irvine is a really good team. They're probably the best team in the state of California. Kansas State, without Dean Wade, can get stuck in the mud offensively, kind of like Wisconsin does, except to a worse extent. And I think we'll see that happen. As this is another game in San Jose, being in California, I think that'll play in UC Irvine's advantage. I think they'll pull the upset.
All right. Now, when we drop back, go ahead.
Is UC Irvine the only California team that made the tournament?
St. Mary's is in.
Yeah.
St. Mary's is in. Okay. So
and St. Mary's is who we're going to talk about next because they played Villanova. And who do you like here, Steve?
I'm not going to bet against Jay Wright. Two-time national champions, defending champions. When I watched the championship game in the Big East and saw how he coached that team to victory, I'm not going to bet against Jay Wright at this level. So I will definitely go with Villanova in this game.
Brian, agree or
It'll be
disagree?
A dogfight.
Yeah, I'll go with Villanova. And I've been wary of them all year, but I also am not a huge fan of the St. Mary's team. Both of them are very perimeter-oriented, Villanova and St. Mary's, and in that case, I always go with the more talented team, and Villanova is definitely that team in this case. It's also played in Hartford, Connecticut, and St. Mary's tends to fall apart whenever they're not in the state of California.
All right, next up, Purdue versus ODU, Old Dominion. Steve?
I'm going to go with Purdue to win this one, but I think Purdue is in jeopardy after this game. And my reason is, like I said, I'm an acquaintance with Matt Painter. I just don't think he's a good tournament coach. And time after time in Purdue has underachieved in the tournament when they've had good talent. Purdue's a very strong team. I think a number 3 seed for them was overkill. I don't think they're that strong. But I think they'll pull this one out. But then when they got to go against Villanova the next game, or, if it's St. Mary's, I think they're in jeopardy big time. So I'll go with Purdue for this game.
All right. I think Old Dominion wins this game by 10 points.
Okay.
When I look at this,
yeah.
I was 50-50 with it, but you look at them. They beat VCU. I think it was by like double digits. They went to Syracuse, beat Syracuse. I think that, and I know Brian agrees because he just said it earlier, I think Purdue's in trouble.
I agree.
It blew my mind to watch people talk about them possibly being in the Final Four. Next up.
Right.
And see, I will be there for that game too. So, all these games I will. Those are some pretty good games too. Well, whatever's in Columbus. Then we got Cincinnati Bearcats against Iowa. Cincinnati, I think, got a bad seed at 7, but they get to play basically at home, about an hour and a half, 2 hours away from Cincinnati.
Yeah.
I think Cincinnati wins this game 35-34. What do you think, Brian?
It was a bad team for Cincinnati, but it was a great draw for them.
Oh, yeah.
Against an Iowa team that's reeling. Cincinnati wins. It'll be a rock fight, but I think they win somewhat comfortably.
All right, Steve?
Yeah, I think Cincinnati wins. Cincinnati's a damn good basketball team. I mean, I've watched them play in the conference championships, and it's a good team.
I can tell you this: anybody that can beat Houston is pretty damn good.
Mm-hmm. And I'm looking forward to the Tennessee Cincinnati matchup. I mean, that's going to be a hell of a game to watch.
Well, let's get to that. What kind of a shot do you give Cincinnati against Tennessee, Brian, since you're playing it basically as a home game?
I almost picked Cincinnati to win that game.
Because I did pick Cincinnati to win that game. And the great thing, if Cincinnati wins that game, they go to Louisville, which gets me credentialed through the Elite Eight.
There you go. I think if it was anybody but Cincinnati, I would have picked them. I still don't trust Cincinnati offensively.
Oh, I don't either.
To beat a team as good as Tennessee. I don't think it'll matter against Iowa, because I think Cincinnati is a better team, and I don't know if Iowa can muster up enough offense anyway. But Tennessee can, and I think Cincinnati may have the lead over Tennessee for probably 35 minutes of that game, but those last 5 minutes is where things typically fall apart for them.
Where they miss free throws, throw the ball away, and can't make it shot. Yeah. I think Cincinnati, I think, will handle this game for a lot of the times, but I think the key is they've got to get to that last 5-minute mark with a 10-point lead.
Mm-hmm.
If they do that, I think they've got a shot. But Mick Cronin, I don't think is the greatest coach in the world either. But
I'll just tell you that in 1981, we had the fortunate privilege of playing the Mid-East Regional at Assembly Hall. And home court advantage.
Oh, shit, Steve, you got to play the first round in Dayton.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Dayton, and then the Mid-East Regional, we went to Bloomington and played there. And home court advantage means so much because fans get rabid, people get jumped up, and I don't see a great difference between Cincinnati and Tennessee. I agree that Tennessee probably a little better coached, but I think the fan base here, and this is going to be a pro-Cincinnati team, is going to juice these guys up, and things get emotional at this level. So I would go with Cincinnati over Tennessee in this game if they both get there.
All right. What do you guys got in the Elite Eight then in that side, Brian?
I have Virginia over Tennessee. I'm not high on Tennessee, but I think their path is very easy to get to the Elite Eight. I have them. We talked about Cincinnati, and then I don't think Villanova is good enough to really challenge them in that Sweet 16 matchup. So I have them against Virginia, but Virginia wins that game by probably 7 points.
All right, Steve.
I got Villanova and UVA, and boy, to me that becomes a toss-up because Jay Wright knows how to coach these games, and there's going to be an air of doubt in Virginia based on last year and then getting knocked out of the ACC tournament early. You know, I don't know how much. I don't know because I'm not in their locker room, not in their practice, how much they believe in themselves. You know, they've had more bad luck than good luck in these things. And so, and Villanova knows how to, Wright knows how to get his team prepared to win these games. So I'm going to go with Villanova and Virginia.
All right. So everybody going Virginia in the Elite Eight. I'm going Virginia Villanova too. I agree with Steve. I've never said that before. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mike. You made my day.
That just makes me think I'm probably like way off here. But that was mean, Steve. I apologize. But
I'm used to it. Don't worry about it. It rolls off me.
So everybody got Virginia then? So we all have nothing but an ACC Final Four so far. Next up, which bracket do we got here? Hold on. I got to move this down.
Oh, wait. Well, you said Elite Eight. You didn't say Final Four, right?
Yeah, you got Virginia in the Final Four. You got Villanova.
I got Villanova in the Final Four.
All right. You're picking this a year too late, Steve. All right. Steve jumped on board a year too late. All right. Yeah, next up, we will go to the West. Gonzaga. The games that stick out to me here as possible upsets are, I think Murray State beats Marquette, and I don't think Vermont beats Florida State, but I think they scare the hell out of them, Brian.
I agree. There's another one I had Vermont pegged as a team to watch that could potentially win a game or two, but Florida State is a bad matchup for them. Again, just because of Florida State's size and athleticism and the way they play defense.
Yeah, but I can tell you this also, Brian. The thing that sticks out to me about Florida State is I don't think their coaching is that great. And if you look at them over the last 2 years, 2 years ago when they were expected to do something, Xavier upsets them in the second round. The next year, Xavier's the team that's seeded, 1 or 2. Florida State, nobody expects anything from them, and they make a run all the way to the Elite Eight. I'm not sure that this is the right coach to get Florida State real deep consistently, and it's a lot easier, I think, to do it when nobody expects it.
I think this is the right style for Leonard Hamilton. That team 2 years ago had some problems that went beyond just him in terms of on-the-court play. They were more talented, but didn't necessarily fit together in the best way and had a problem being motivated for a lot of these games, which the reason for that is beyond me. But Vermont is a smaller team that isn't very athletic and beats you with their smarts and efficiency. And while they can certainly do that against Florida State, I think Florida State's size and athleticism is going to overwhelm them, considering the talent advantage they have as well.
All right, let's talk Gonzaga real quick, because to me, what screams upset to me is a possible second-round matchup with Syracuse.
The potential for it is there.
I don't think it'll happen, but it's...
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it will either. Syracuse's zone is always tricky, but Gonzaga has good shooters, and their zone is not as good as it has been in years past. Tyus Battle also isn't 100%, who they've relied on to carry them offensively in tournaments in years past. They may keep it interesting and make it more of a rock fight than Gonzaga wants it to be, but I think the Zags will win by double digits in that game.
All right, so when we look at that top half of that bracket, who was the most dangerous team at Gonzaga? Is it Florida State? Is it Murray State with Jai Morant? Is it Marquette with Marcus Howard?
I think it's Florida State. Florida State beat them in the Sweet 16 last year. Their pressing style really gave Gonzaga's guards a lot of problems, and both teams essentially have the same cores back. I don't think it will happen twice. I think Gonzaga wins that and goes to the Elite Eight. But, I mean, we just have to go back and see what we saw last year. Florida State has the style of play that gives Gonzaga problems.
Now, what about Murray State if they were to beat Marquette or Marquette? I think both of those, with their guard play, could be tough matchups for Florida State.
Marquette, if they get hot, can beat anybody.
Oh, yeah. They could win a national championship if they go off.
Right. The problem is that hasn't happened consistently. I have them losing to Murray State because I think Murray State has the guard play to match them, and Murray State is going to have the best player on the court in Ja Morant. I think eventually, though, Morant can only take them so far. They're going to need some other guys to step up, and those other guys are capable of doing so, but I don't think they're capable of doing that on more than one occasion. So I have them losing to Florida State in the second round.
All right, Steve, what's your take at the top part of that bracket?
I think that Florida State's the most dangerous team to Gonzaga. I watched them play in the ACC tournament, and that's one physical basketball team that plays very hard physical defense, and they get after it, and they push the ball up and down the court. In these early rounds, talent matters more than coaching. As you get more into the tournament, coaching starts to become more important than talent. But if I was Gonzaga, I would be disappointed that I'm going to have to face Florida State in the top half of that bracket. That's going to be a great game to watch if they both get there. Marquette, I think Marquette wins, beats Murray State. I think Marquette's playing good basketball. They're good, but I would be very afraid to have to go play Florida State right now.
I would be afraid to play Marquette or Murray State because with Howard and Morant, either one of those guys goes off. Even if you're the better team, you could have an issue. Mm-hmm. We look at the bottom part of that bracket. I think Buffalo, Texas Tech. The game that stands out to me as being the toss-ups, Nevada and Florida. And I really think that right now I'm kind of leaning towards Florida, Brian.
I agree. It's kind of a battle of underachieving teams who aren't at the level their talent says they should be, particularly offensively. It's going to be an ugly game, I think, but I agree. I think I'm leaning Florida's direction.
All right. So, Steve, who would you have in your elite Elite Eight here?
Given the fact that I think the bottom half of this draw, I haven't seen enough of Buffalo to know if they're legit or not.
Legit.
Brian, is Buffalo legit?
They're legit.
Are they legit?
Yeah.
Then I would go with Gonzaga and Buffalo. I think Michigan's way overrated. I just don't think they're playing offensively good enough right now to come out of that bottom thing. Nevada has struggled late at the time. I like Florida, but they're up and down. But if Buffalo is a team that's been consistent all year long, and the time I watched them play, they were good, I would go a strong battle between Gonzaga and FSU. I think Gonzaga wins that game because they've got a better coach. And then I would say Buffalo coming out of the bottom half of that draw. So I've got Buffalo and Gonzaga playing for the Elite Eight.
All right, what I got here, Brian, is I've got Gonzaga. I think they're going to struggle with Syracuse. I think they're going to struggle in the Sweet 16 against whoever they play. I'm hoping for Murray State to make a run on this because I really like to watch Morant play. The bottom of that bracket, to me, Texas Tech is head and shoulders above everybody else. I think when they're playing well athletically, they're one of those teams that I think can actually play with Duke, and they proved that earlier. I think Texas Tech-Buffalo would be a great second-round matchup. And then I think Texas Tech is athletically just better than Michigan, and I think defensively they're as good as anybody, but I think they can score more. They got Culver. So I like Gonzaga against Texas Tech, and I like Texas Tech in the Final Four.
I have the exact same thing.
Brian's a very smart guy. That's why we have him on, Steve. Who you got, Steve? You got Gonzaga or Buffalo?
Oh, I think Gonzaga goes to the Final Four.
Okay.
I think they're methodical. And, methodical means you don't get rattled and you learn how to win games. We were methodical in 1981. We did things by a process and never diverted from our process. And Mark Few is brilliant at doing that. So I think Gonzaga.
I'll tell you another one when we look at possible upsets. I know I just said they'd get to the Final Four, but I would not be surprised if NKU plays Texas Tech tough, Brian.
They can play them tough, I think, for a half, but
I think they can play them tough for 30 minutes, and then they're going to lose by 15 or 20.
That's a game where Texas Tech's athleticism wins out at the end at some point.
Because NKU's got Drew McDonald, who's a very good player, and they were here, if you remember, 2 years ago as a 15 seed, and I think lost to Kentucky by 9 in a game that was like a 3-point game with a minute or two left, and they missed a couple free throws, which killed them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, other side, North Carolina.
No, Mike, you're breaking my NASCAR partner Alex Gray's heart right now by saying
I'm not,
NKU's
because
gonna
I
lose.
just brought him up during a bracket selection show. Nobody else has. We are credentialed for NKU. I live like 25 minutes from the campus. I coach an arena football team in the same building they're in. So even though I picked Texas Tech, I'm hoping I'm wrong and NKU beats them. Other side, Utah State, North Carolina in the second round. Am I nuts to think that could be dangerous for Carolina?
It'll be very uncomfortable for the Tar Heels. I think UNC ends up winning that game, but Utah State, I think, blows out Washington in that first round matchup and provides a very, very tough test. I think UNC maybe only wins that game by a possession or two.
Now, when I look at the bottom part of this, I see a couple more possible upsets. I think New Mexico State's going to beat Auburn. I know Auburn's hot, but how many times have we seen teams that are hot in a tournament, win their tournament, go to the NCAA, kind of flame out? And I think Northeastern could give Kansas a game. I think Kansas beats them, but I think New Mexico State beats Auburn.
I think Northeastern beats Kansas. Kansas, we've talked about their struggles a lot throughout the season. One of their big things is that they're not great defending the three. Northeastern ranks top 20 in the country in three-point shooting. Was one of the things that helped them win the CAA tournament and get to this point. I think that'll be kind of one of the big shockers of the first weekend.
Steve?
Which game are we talking about?
Just the bracket. What we just talked about.
The bracket?
Jeez. All right. Do you think, well,
no,
just the top part of it,
games.
the Northeastern, the 4 games kind of lumped in. The other thing I'll give Northeastern is Northeastern blew Alabama out this year. And they did get hammered by Virginia Tech. I think in the end, though, I think what we saw, Kansas doesn't defend the 3 well. Northeastern doesn't really play a lot of teams that are really good defensively. And maybe the best defensive team they played was who? Maybe Virginia Tech?
Yeah.
And Virginia Tech, they did not shoot the ball well, and they got beat by close to 30 points, if I remember right, against Virginia Tech. I hope Northeastern wins. I think they have a legitimate shot to win this game, though. I just want to know why you completely blew off my New Mexico State, Brian.
I was just excited to get to my Northeastern pick. I think Auburn will win that game. New Mexico State's a very good team, but it certainly could happen, but I don't see Auburn cooling off that drastically, that quickly to lose that game. Although it's certainly a possibility because Mexico State's a good team, particularly defensively.
All right, Steve, what's your take on that little pot of games?
Well, the fact here is a player who's gone all the way through this process. A lot of these teams come into this, and it's their first experience, and they get caught up in the hype. And a lot of teams, if you watch the selection show, and they got guys sitting in the locker room eating pizza and jumping up and down when they get their face on TV. We would have never done that at IU. We expected to be there. We knew we had a work to do, and we were due diligence doing our work. A lot of these people come in here and God, we're just happy to be here. And then, upsets are going to happen. There's no doubt about it. But I'm not going to go against this thing. The top half of this ended up being Kansas and North Carolina. I just think those are two teams that have been through this process enough times. The coaching staffs have, enough players have come through, that ends up being a difference. And the more deep you get into the tournament, the more coaching becomes important. And there are going to be
and
upsets.
I can tell you this, New Mexico State has a better coach than Kansas, and so does Northeastern.
Okay.
Just because you're a big-time program don't mean you get the better coach. He's got the better players, so he wins more often. I like New Mexico State going to the Sweet 16 to play North Carolina. New Mexico State played Kansas at Kansas. I watched this game, and from what I remember, New Mexico State handled them pretty well most of the game and ended up coming up short by 2 or 3 points, Brian.
Yeah, they led that game late. I think it was the first game Kansas played without Udoka Azubuike, so they were adjusting to that. But as we kind of saw, that was kind of just who they were.
Yeah, and when I look at it, I think the Auburn-New Mexico State winner gets thumped by North Carolina in the Sweet 16.
Yeah, I agree.
The lower part of that bracket, we've got Iowa State, Ohio State, Steve. Can Ohio State beat them, or will they beat them?
No, I don't believe so.
No.
Iowa State's a good basketball program. I don't think so.
Yeah, Houston, Georgia State,
and they're playing in Oklahoma. Again, they're playing in Tulsa, which is basically in Iowa's backyard.
Yeah, well,
so
it is,
but
a different state. Houston, Georgia State. Yeah. When I look at that, I think you got a Houston Iowa State game, which I think is one of the best second round matchups you can get, Brian.
If the good Iowa State shows up, I agree. But the bad Iowa State is bound to show up again at some point.
Yeah.
And I think it might happen in that game. They're traditionally, I think they've won 4 of the last 6 Big 12 tournaments. So I don't take them necessarily that run they had last weekend. I don't think they'll necessarily carry over in the way a lot of people think it will. I think they'll kind of revert back to the mean. And I think that'll be enough to beat Ohio State, but I don't think that'll be anywhere near enough to beat Houston.
All right, the bottom part, we got Wofford against Seton Hall. When would you ever think Wofford would be favored to beat Seton Hall? And Kentucky playing Abilene Christian. I think we get a Kentucky-Wofford matchup, which I think could be a really good game again.
I liked both Wofford and Seton Hall before the bracket came out to win a couple of games. They were 2 of my kind of sleeper favorites, so I'm disappointed that they ended up playing each other, although it's going to be, I think, the best game of the first 2 days there. And I'm disappointed that they ended up with Kentucky as a 2 seed. So I think Kentucky beats whoever wins that game. I'm going with Seton Hall over Wofford, though. I like Miles Powell to win the Miles Powell, Fletcher McGee matchup there. And Seton Hall's got more athletes. And they've sort of turned it on late. And I've just seen Miles Powell make too many big plays late in big games. Knowing that the game's going to be close late, I trust him more than I trust Wofford.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Wofford. I've watched Seton Hall a lot this year, and they're not always the most consistent team either, Brian.
They're not. They're very young. I've maybe fallen in love with Powell, and they've been playing lately, but Wofford's an experienced team, and Seton Hall's young. So that could certainly be something that ends up biting the Pirates in the butt.
So my Sweet 16 here is actually Houston against Kentucky, Steve. What do you think?
I agree.
Brian?
Yeah, that's what I have as well. I have Kentucky winning that game, but it's going to be extremely close.
Okay, so you've got Kentucky, North Carolina, Brian?
I do. I have UNC winning, but again, that'll be another one of those kind of down to the wire, epic finish kind of games.
All right, Steve?
I've got Houston and Kentucky, or Houston and UNC, and I'm tell you what, that's going to be a dogfight.
Son of a bitch. I'm tired of this. I can't let you go first if we're going to agree, because I think Houston upsets Kentucky also.
I agree, yeah. I think they do.
So does Houston upset North Carolina, Steve?
Yeah, I think Houston's in the Final Four this year. Some silly reason, that's my stupid pick of the tournament.
It's not a stupid pick. They've been ranked in the top 10 the majority of the last half of the season. North Carolina has peaked. I think they played their best ball. They got themselves in shape, but I think they've peaked and they're on a downward trend. I like Houston. I hope you're right, Steve. But remember this: Houston got handled by Cincinnati yesterday. I'm going North Carolina. So we've got a Final Four of I've got Duke, Virginia, Texas Tech, North Carolina. Brian, you got the same thing. Steve's
I have the exact same thing.
Steve's got Duke, Villanova, Gonzaga, and Houston. So it looks like we'll be making fun of Steve this year again.
Yeah, I know. I'll lose.
You never know. You could be right, though.
That's
all right.
Fine.
So we've got Duke versus Texas Tech, or we've got Duke versus Gonzaga. Duke versus Gonzaga, Steve, who do you like?
I don't think anybody can beat Duke except Duke. I just think they're too powerful of a basketball team. They're healthy. They've got the greatest college coach in the game right now. And I don't think anybody can beat Duke.
Brian, you would have Duke, Texas Tech. Who do you got?
A rematch of game we saw in December at Madison Square Garden. It's close.
Which was a tight game
minutes.
For almost the entire game. They had some foul trouble, didn't they?
Yeah, well, Texas Tech's offense kind of eventually wasn't able to keep up down the stretch. And while they've improved, I still expect that to be the case. I would pick Duke to win that late.
Alrighty. I agree, even though I want to pick Texas Tech. All right, on the other side, Steve, you've got Villanova versus Houston.
I would not bet against Jay Wright. I mean,
Steve,
I would not bet against
this. You're doing this a year too late.
It takes longer to learn things sometimes, Mike. I'm not a quick thinker like you are, so I think Villanova is playing its best basketball right now. I watched them play in the championships of the Big East, and a team makes very few mistakes. And it's like I said, it's 51% luck, and they create their own luck. I'm just not going to bet against Villanova to return back to the Final Four.
All right, Virginia versus North Carolina. Brian?
Virginia won earlier this season, but I think UNC wins. I think UNC is playing about as well as anybody in the country. They've won 15 of their last 17 games, I believe, with the last loss coming in that 1-point loss to Duke in the ACC tournament, even though they didn't shoot the ball well from three. UNC still almost won that game. I like them to win that game, and I like them to beat Duke in their rematch in the national championship game.
All right, so do you have Duke winning it all, Steve?
I think you'd be a fool not to pick them.
I think you'd be a fool to put Villanova in a national championship game, so go ahead and pick.
I think the only team that can beat Duke is Duke. If they play well. I mean, but it's the tournament.
Well, Duke
beat March Madness.
Duke, Steve.
Well, that's the $10 question.
All right,
are you Duke, as far as I'm concerned?
So you're picking Duke over Villanova, and just for the hell of it, and I think Virginia beats Duke behind Kyle Guy scoring 47 points to win the national championship.
And I hope he does. I hope he does, because that's another great plaque on the wall for Lawrence Central High School where I played, and that'll get mounted up there, and that's deservedly so. And
because then they'll have a national champion that was also the leading scorer in school history.
And they'll have 2 national championship players from that school,
but the
too.
other guy scored 47 and was the most outstanding player.
What you don't know, Mike, is Norm Sloan was a Lawrence Central grad. So they have a national championship coach. So right now we have Norm Sloan and me up there right now as national champions. And now we add Kyle Guy. So that's great for my high school. I'm all for that. Go get it done, Kyle. Knock it out of the park.
All right. So,
how many high schools can say that? Can your high school say that? Can Aurora High School say that?
Well, you know what Aurora High School can claim is they beat Lawrence Central in the 1977 Sweet 16.
16.
The best team Lawrence Central ever had, their best chance to win a state championship, and they lost to a school with 4 kids, and the tallest kid on the team was 3'3".
You know what we also have? You know what Lawrence Central also has? We have Gordon Teeter. Do you know who Gordon Teeter was?
No. Who's Gordon Teeter?
He was the founder of Wendy's.
I thought that was Dave.
No, Dave Thomas was a front man for him. He wasn't the founder of it. Gordon Teeter founded Wendy's. Dave Thomas was just a front man for the organization.
So you've got poison food to give the American public also. Plus you've got Kyle Guy, the leading scorer all time. And then you've got...
I'm rooting for Kyle Guy.
Yeah, okay.
He's in there. Let's go. Lawrence Central, get it done.
Brian, you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Yes, we have a lot of pre-NCAA tournament stuff up on bustingbrackets.com. Everything you can need for filling out your bracket, picking the right upsets, teams to make a long run. All of that, again, is on bustingbrackets.com. Or you can follow me on Twitter at brauf33. It's BRAUF 33.
All right, guys, we are going to go ahead and wrap this part of the show up. We will be back with On This Day with Bobby Sheridan after this commercial break. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Brian.
Hi, I'm Mike Goodpaster from the Grueling Truth Sports Network, and I'm here with just one simple message. If you're watching the games, it's time to start making money. The Grueling Truth has recently partnered with MyBookie.ag, an industry-leading sportsbook website, who reminds you that where you bet is just as important as who you're betting on, and that's why The Grueling Truth urges you to check out MyBookie.ag. In addition to the usual thousands of odds, money lines, proposition bets, and futures offered on MyBookie.ag daily, they also have in-game live betting and a mobile site that makes wagering on the go easier than ever. So join now and MyBookie will give you up to a free $1,000 cash bonus on your first deposit. Just enter promo code TGT50, that's TGT50, to take advantage of this offer. You can also go to thegruelingtruth.net, click the banner at the top of the page for MyBookie.ag, and also get the same benefit and the same $1,000 free cash bonus on your first deposit. So visit MyBookie.ag, courtesy of The Grueling Truth, and enjoy winning today. MyBookie.ag. You play, you win, you get paid.
All right, guys, we're back on Survive in Advance. I'm Mike Goodpaster with Steve Risley. We want to thank Brian Rauf again from Busting Brackets for coming on this show. And you know what I did again, Steve?
What'd you do?
I forgot to call Bobby again. I always do that. Then I'm sitting here and I'm getting ready to introduce him, and I think, man, I probably ought to call him. So now I'll call him.
Do we have him?
Huh?
Who is Joseph Sheridan? Is that Bobby's real first name?
I don't know. But Dave Thomas
be out to ask
founded
him that
Wendy's,
question.
by the way.
Yeah, he founded it, but Gordon Teeter ran it and turned it into
It
Wendy's.
doesn't matter. You said he founded it. The founder is the one that gets paid all the jack, Steve.
You're right. Mm-hmm. Okay.
What? I just looked it up because I always thought it was Dave Thomas. You threw me for a loop. I know.
No. Dave Thomas was he was the front man. He was like Colonel Sanders.
Yeah, he's the one that founded it. He invented it.
He's the one that founded it. He created it, but then there were other people, and Gordon Teeter was from Lawrence Central, but he turned Wendy's into Wendy's. So on the Wall of Fame, there are about 8 pictures on the Wall of Fame at Lawrence Central High School. Kyle Guy and me, Norm Sloan, Gordon Teeter, and 3 or 4 other people that I'm not really familiar with because I've actually got a picture of it.
Well, you know what? This is the thing. When Kyle Guy tells the story, he'll say, the 8 people on the wall are me, Gordon Teeter, Norm Sloan, and then a bunch of other people you've never heard of. Let's welcome to the show a man everybody knows, Bobby Sheridan. How you doing, Bobby?
Bobby!
Hey, good morning, and it's great to hear Steve back on the Surviving Advance, and you're coming in at the right time, Steve. This is tournament championship time.
Well, here's the deal. I had to leave for 4 days because I was on a secret mission for DT. Robin and I went over to North Korea to try and negotiate with Kim Jong-un. And, we took a special flight, a plane, and went over there and tried to figure out how to fix the nukes thing. So we've been gone for 4 or 5 days doing it. I got to tell you 2 things. Kim Jong-un's an idiot, and the United States government has very nice airplanes. They serve lobster and shrimp cocktail on the flight.
They wouldn't let you get through airport security. All right, Bobby, what do we have for on this day?
On this day, Mike, there's about 4 things listed, and
but remember, we got to save at least a couple of them for the later show. So I would go with the 1953. Steve should be able to knock that one out.
Yeah, I was going to say let's stick to the basketball.
Bobby Leonard. Talk about Bobby Leonard.
Was great.
Yeah.
So let's go 1953. On this day, IU beat Kansas 69-68. It was the 15th NCAA championship at that time. And that was IU's what? Was that IU's first?
No, second.
No, 40
the first was in 1940. Beat Oregon.
The 40 team, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Very good, Mike. What do you got for me on this championship?
I don't know, Steve. You want to run with it? Or you want me to?
No, go ahead.
Because the thing I most remember about this...
I'll do color commentary.
Yeah, this was Branch McCracken. I think this was like his 12th year. He wasn't a coach on the... Was he the coach... Was 40 his first year, Steve? Did he win the national championship at 40? I don't remember. I think he did.
Was it Claire B? It was Claire B. Was it Claire B?
No, Claire B wasn't a coach at Indiana, Steve. Come on. But I think it was. I don't know. It was their second title. I can't remember if that was his first title or if he won it in 40. I don't remember, and I don't feel like Googling. But what I remember from this team is Bobby Leonard, of course. Great player, and there was no assembly hall at the time. They played at the field house.
The field house.
Yeah, and the thing about that tournament run that I remember is they also had, I think they had like a total of 4 guys that were drafted into the NBA after the 1954 or were drafted in 54. The year after that, you had Leonard, I think Dick Farley, Lou Scott, and Charlie Crack. Or Craig, I don't remember how to say his name. And then the 5th starter was drafted in 1955, which was Don Schlunt.
Don Schlunt.
Yeah, the most interesting thing about this tournament run is outside of the national championship win against Kansas, number 1, they beat LSU in the Final Four, which I think Steve remembers another team that beat LSU in the Final Four.
For the 81 team. Yeah.
There you go. And Indiana beat Notre Dame to get to the Final Four. And their toughest win was probably against DePaul. And my question is this, Steve. I don't know if this is true or not, but did Ray Meyer coach the DePaul team in 53 that IU played?
No, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I would have to Google that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure either, yeah. Schedule results here. I'm on the web.
This is where you get the time that was probably the greatest in Hoosier Hysteria's history. Because you had a 53 national championship team. You had the 54 Milan team they made the movie Hoosiers off of. And then you had 55 and 56, Oscar Robertson, who we talked about last week a little bit, Bobby, who led Crispus Attucks to back-to-back state championships. Then you had guys in the early 60s like Jimmy Rail and then Rick Mount later in the 60s who took Purdue to a national championship game against UCLA. But I think this was probably the golden age of Indiana basketball, Steve.
Basketball. Yeah, I agree. Mike, was Chamberlain on the 53 team?
I don't think he was.
I thought
he was on the team that won the championship a few years later, I think.
Later, okay. But, interesting, they beat Kansas in Kansas City, Missouri.
Yeah.
That's where the national champions held that year. So for Indiana to go and do that, but here's the things. Dick Farley is from Winslow, Indiana. And my wife was born and lived in Winslow, Indiana. And I've crossed the Dick Farley Bridge so many times, it's driven me crazy.
I'm glad you said Farley after that. But
the Dick Farley Bridge, my wife was born in Winslow, Indiana. So.
I got to get my mind out of it.
And then Don Schlund is a member of the 34 Club, which is all the greatest players of IU that have worn 34.
Are you a
Brian
member?
Evans, me,
Are
Steve
you a
Green.
member? Or
I'm a
did it
member.
let
I wore
anybody...
34.
So wait a second.
So I've got more ties
Wait a
to this
second.
team. And here's the other deal. When I was in high school, I had a part-time job over college selling Christmas trees. And Bobby Leonard comes in, and I'm a part-time guy and some regular guy in Weaver's Tree Farm. I'll never forget this. Back in 1976. And I sold Bobby Leonard a Christmas tree.
Hey, and how about this? You know
when
who
he was coaching the Pacers.
You know who was on the 53 Kansas team? Because I don't remember who the star was or anything. I know that Chamberlain would have been he was on the 57 team, but the 53 team, I'm pretty sure that Dean Smith was a backup on that team.
Was he?
Yeah. It was the first time that Indiana beat LSU in the semifinals and Dean Smith in the finals.
Yeah, did we figure out who the coach was in 53 for Indiana? Branch McCracken.
Yeah, it was Branch McCracken. The question was he the coach in 1940? I think he was, because I think 40 was his first year, and he won it all in 40 also.
Why do I think it was Claire? Why do I have Claire B in my brain? I know Knight loved Claire B.
Knight loved Claire B, but Claire B.
Yeah.
I don't think he was. But,
yeah, the head coach was McCracken won in 40 and 53, so yes, he did.
Yeah. But I don't know why you're thinking of Claire B, because Claire B was coaching out on the West Coast, wasn't he?
Yeah, he just was a man that Knight had admirable respect for. And so I just got confused. So yeah,
Claire B is the one that wrote all the old coaching books that Knight liked. Because Claire B, I think, coached at Long Island.
Pete Newell, he loved Pete Newell too. Yeah.
Yeah, Pete Newell. Who was the other one too? Yeah, Hank Iba. He loved Iba too.
Hank Iba, he loved Hank Iba. And actually, I played golf with Pete Newell's son at the club that I play golf with out here in California. And we've had many conversations about how much Pete Newell loved Coach Knight and things like that. So,
well, here's the thing: Claire B. Did you know Claire B. for a 20-year span won 83% of his games in college basketball. He coached at Long Island. Now, here's the problem, though, and this is why I always wondered why Knight loved him. Which B decided to go to the NBA in 1952. He resigned in 1951 because several of his players were implicated in that CCNY point shaving scandal.
Yeah.
And Long Island, it was so bad that Long Island shut down its athletic program actually at that time.
Yeah, but I know he was, Knight had few idols that he brought in front of us, but he talked about and he referenced, and Claire B was one of them. Hank Iba was definitely one. Pete Newell was probably his mentor, and that was great. But Branch, and it's funny because I don't ever remember Knight ever talking about Branch McCracken. I'm trying to pick my brain right now because I'm thinking, okay, McCracken wins 2 championships, and then Knight comes in and wins 3. That's the 5 of our championships. But you don't hear. I never heard Knight really speak anything to Branch
think
McCracken.
This is the reason you heard about Claire B. and Hank Iba. It was Claire B. wrote the book on the 1-3-1 zone defense. He's the guy that got college basketball to go to the 3-second rule. But what I think I remember reading was that Knight actually went to coaching clinics in the late 60s that Claire B. was the main speaker at. And I think that's how he became friends with B. Plus, B won 83% of the college games he ever coached. But I think that was the connection there. Where with Branch, McCracken retired 10 to 15 years before Knight even got to IU.
Yeah, did Jerry Oliver coach the team after that? Was he the next one after McCracken?
I keep hearing music. Why do I keep hearing music?
So,
do you hear music, Steve, every once in a while?
Yep, I hear music.
Hey,
too.
Bobby, are you jamming over there to some music?
Are you jamming over there? And
I've got zero music on. My line's cutting in and out a little bit, but I
bet when you're cutting in and out, that's when we're hearing the music.
music.
But I've got no music on. Guys, I've got no music on.
Oh, I know, but what
No
I'm
big
saying,
deal.
there it goes. There it is again. I feel like I'm an urban
it is.
cowboy, and I'm John Travolta and Steve Sissy Spacek. Or not Sissy Spacek. What's her name?
No, that would be Deborah Winger.
Deborah Winger. I don't know why I always think of Sissy Spacek. I think it's because of Every Which Way But Loose, and I don't know.
She was in Carrie. She was in Carrie.
Yeah, but Jerry Oliver was.
Steve,
Yeah, Jerry Oliver was only the Indiana basketball coach for like 1 or 2 years, Steve. He was like 71 or something like that, 69 and 70.
So who followed McCracken? Who came after McCracken?
I don't even remember. Whoever it was,
I don't know.
failed because I don't remember.
Wasn't good.
No.
Yeah.
After McCracken left, I don't think things were very good at Indiana until Knight got there. I mean, they had some great players like the Van Arsdales, and but other than that, they weren't much without Knight. I do. I keep hearing country music, and it's freaking me out. Hey, Bobby, when you go back and listen to the show, listen to the part where you're on and see if it just goes quiet or if it's country music. Because if it's country music, you'll know we weren't kidding.
I'm hearing it too, but that's okay. That's what makes
I think it's got to be Risley bringing something back from his mission or something. I've got no
yeah. You know what it is? Them damn North Koreans are bugging us now,
It's
Steve.
the radioactivity.
Yeah, it's the North Koreans.
It set Steve back a year because all of his picks would have been good in 2018.
Bobby.
One of those movies where you go back in the past or something.
Bobby, when you're 60 years old, you live in the past, okay?
Krzyzewski's only been the best coach since '92. I mean, you can pick them based on that every year.
Hey, I like Jay Wright better than Krzyzewski myself, Bobby. What do you think of that?
Well,
it's just their team's not nearly as good. All right.
Yeah.
And Bobby has a little inside info because he watched UC Irvine play in person Saturday night.
I did,
I didn't get a call to go to that game.
You were in North Korea,
Appreciate
dipshit. You went on the special mission to stop Kim Jong-un. Bobby went on a special mission to watch UC Irvine.
But Bobby didn't know I was in North Korea.
Bobby didn't know you were at UC Irvine either. Exactly.
Yeah, you guys are cutting out a little bit.
Exactly, Steve. Bobby didn't tell you he was going to UC Irvine, but you didn't tell Bobby you were going to North Korea. So, Bobby, what was your take on UC Irvine?
Let me tell you something, guys. That was a treat to watch them play. Here's going to be the $1 million question, and it's nothing I'm bringing up that nobody else knows, but they are a very good team. History of their program, but they played Cal State Fullerton in the finals. They wouldn't.
Yeah.
They're terrible.
They were below 500, I think, Bobby.
Right. They got lucky to get there and play. There were other better teams that would have given a better performance in the championship game, but Irvine had two big guys that were players, just cloggers. They could play. They had a style of play that was very good, coached really hard and really well by their coach. And they had a guy, number 2, his last name was Hazard. I kept thinking, God, this has got to be Walt Hazard's grandson or great-grandson, whatever that would make him, at this time. And that guy was filling it up, man. I mean, he could shoot the three. He was all over the place. They played hard on defense. They were up 25 in the second half, and I go, it's time to go because there's no chance of a letdown in letting Fullerton back in this game, so I got out of there early. It was at the Honda Center.
The thing that worries me about them is when they played better competition this year, they lost to Toledo, who's a 6th seed in the NIT, by 7 at home. They did beat St. Mary's by 5, but probably the best team they played this year was Utah State and Butler, and Utah State beat them by like 24, and Butler beat them by 17. So that's what worries me about them. That and the fact that just the competition they play is not great, but when they did step up and play better competition, they didn't have a whole lot of luck. I actually give them a shot in their first round game. I give them a shot to go to the Sweet 16. It's just those are the things that stand out as being worrisome to me. Kansas State, I think, is a great matchup for them because if Dean Wade can't play, I think UC Irvine can definitely win that game.
Yeah, I think they can too, and that's going to be a great thing to look at. It's going to be a tough line for Vegas to put out, and I'm going to pour over those games today and tomorrow. But I think 5 or 5.5. Was that it, Mike?
I haven't looked at it yet, to tell you the truth.
I think it's 5 or 5.5. I usually remember things pretty good, but I didn't. Like I said, I didn't really look at it. But then you've also got Wisconsin playing Oregon, and that game is.
I think I did see the line on that, and the line was like Wisconsin by 1 or Oregon by 1. I know it was tight.
It was Oregon by 1 or 1.5. Yeah, it was Oregon.
Which makes you wonder why Wisconsin seeded 5th and Oregon seeded 12th.
Well, that goes
Bobby,
to show you where we're changing landscapes, Mike.
Yeah, and that's a great call in. What does it say to the fact that we're talking about UC Irvine and not talking about Stanford, UCLA, USC? We're not talking about the Pac-12 at all. We're talking now about what's the conference? Is the West Coast Athletic Conference they play in with Northridge, Cal State Northridge, CSUN,
Big West.
Guys, what's that kind?
UC Irvine is the Big West.
Big West, sorry. We're talking about the Big West more than we're talking about the Pac-12 now. What does that say to the landscape of basketball on the West Coast?
I think this. I think when you look at it, I think the Pac-12 is probably about the 10th best conference in the country right now.
Yeah, are they a Power 5 conference?
No, they are technically, but they're not.
Well, okay, now listen, Mike. I heard a little 15-minute blurb on this. Now I'm going to be off on some of my numbers, but you'll get the point, okay? The point is that the Pac-12 lost more kids to the first round of the in the last 3 years as freshmen, okay, sophomores, very early on, and key players all at the same time. They're now reloading. Do you know that they went into this year with the fewest amount of minutes played by upperclassmen on returning rosters from any major conference in the country?
Hey,
so
Bobby,
really with that conference, it was that conference. But Mike, let me just finish the point. But they were a young team this year who was starting the year, and they've that the Pac-12 is not going to do crap back conference, but don't be surprised if now by the end of the year,
Bobby,
Oregon, Washington, and Arizona State might make the final 32.
They won't. But, Bobby, my question is this then. With all those guys that went to the NBA right away, where were all the teams they had in the Final Four and the Elite Eight?
I don't...
Oh, Bobby, your phone's cutting out really bad.
Bobby, you're killing us. Mike,
it is.
Mike,
Go ahead,
when
Bobby.
was the last time?
I think he's back now. Go ahead, Bobby.
Okay. All right, go, Bobby.
Yeah, I was going to say coaching. I think that comes back to coaching a little bit. And, a lot of coaches, it's tough to, to work in these young guys. Miller has done a pretty good job of that, but they had
Bobby.
Yeah, I'm here. It just goes in and out.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, guys.
Cutting out. That's all right.
Maybe,
it happens.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
No, we'll
Go
figure
ahead.
it out.
Steve, what do you have? We got to wrap this up because I got to do some business.
I'm not even going to ask. I know what it is, but I'm not going to ask. Okay, Bobby. I know you guys you're going to deal with the other stuff on your guys' show.
Well, I got to do some business before that, but go ahead.
The Lakers, Bobby. Where are the Lakers? Are they going to make the playoffs? Are they close? Are they done or what?
Stop it, Steve. Stop it. You know that I was right on this, and you and Bobby were so wrong.
I know. But I've got to. Mike, I have no problem taking crap from you. No problem.
Bobby gave up a week ago, Steve. It's time for you to give up now.
Are they done, Bobby? Are the Lakers out of the playoffs? Did Bobby just hang up on me?
No, I think Bobby's phone cut out, though. Bobby.
Bobby.
Steve?
Mike, I had fun today.
All right, Steve, I'm going to put it to you rather bluntly. The LA Clippers are 41-30.
Yeah.
And they are in 8th place. The Los Angeles Lakers are in 11th place, 10 games behind them. They are 10 games out with 11 games left. And they are also behind the Kings and the T-Wolves. So I was right there, too. But, all right, guys, here's the deal.
They lost Brandon Ingram, or who was their big player?
I don't even know.
Arm surgery?
I don't know. I don't care. It's Lakers. They suck. I tried to explain you to that guy. You guys didn't listen. But, all right, we may be back with the Sheridan Report here in about a half an hour. We may not. We got to get the phone taken care of with Bobby. I don't know when we'll be back. It will probably be tomorrow at some point. Hopefully, I'll be at the NCAA tournament, so we're just going to have to kind of see what we can do that way. We will be back.
Well, I think the fun thing is, Mike, is if we can just do it whenever we can, and to all the people that listen to us, what I see is if we get live reports from you being there, I think that's worth changing times a little bit and just pick us up when we can. But if Mike's there,
we will be back for sure
in the press conferences.
Yeah, we'll be back with a show for sure on Thursday, and then Friday I'm going to Columbus. So Friday, I would say if we do a show, it may be between the daytime session and the evening session. But just kind of keep an eye out. You can follow us on Twitter at TGT or at I almost gave the boxing site thing, but at The Grueling Truth on Twitter. Follow us there. You'll know when we go live, and of course we'll post a podcast all over the place anyways. Steve, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today because I really got to do some business. You get less than 10 seconds.
I get one more question. I got ask one more question, then you can go. Then go do your business. I know it's just shitty. I hate that.
Hurry up.
Is this the greatest 4 days of sports in the United States coming up here Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday?
Yeah. It's my favorite time. Actually, from tomorrow through Sunday, because, tomorrow night we'll get to see Belmont play. On Thursday night, you get Chris Mullen against Bobby Hurley. I don't care about watching the teams play, but I would love to watch those guys go one-on-one. And then, of course,
are we doing an IU show tomorrow night? Because we have an IU game tomorrow.
You guys are going to have to do that. So you'll have to do it on a free conference call, and then you and Jeremiah get it up. But yeah. There'll be a post-game show after the spine-tingling Indiana-St. Francis matchup. But we are going to wrap it up right now. 2 o'clock today, approximately, Bobby Sheridan with the Sheridan Report. 11 o'clock tonight, Inside Boxing Daily. You can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, wherever you find sports podcasts. You'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Bobby Sheridan, Brian Rauf, Steve Risley, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.